Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. This is the Catholic Bible Daily Reflections podcast. My name is Caroline, and today is episode 4. It's Daily Reflection of the Bible, number 4. And today we are talking about the Great Flood, Genesis chapters 7 and 8. We left off yesterday talking about the run-up to the flood, and today we'll continue on. Welcome and welcome back. If you're joining us from having watched the other episodes, welcome back. And if you're new here, thank you so much for joining. Welcome. I hope that you will all continue watching these podcast episodes of mine daily, where we reflect on different things within the Bible and compare and discuss how these relate to our days today. So today, as I said, we were talking about Genesis chapter 7 and 8. The flood happens. Yesterday, in yesterday's episode, we talked about the run-up to the Great Flood. We also are going to talk about, doubts of some that say that the flood never happened, that it didn't happen in the way that is said to have happened from the Bible. We'll also talk about baptism. We'll also talk about the Our Lady of Fatima and the Fatima apparition, specifically the miracle of the sun, and how this all ties back to the Great Flood. So with that, just a little run up from yesterday, we talked about the wickedness across the earth, the growing wickedness, so much wickedness. Now there's original sin in the world, there's the devil in the world, and we had Cain who murdered Abel, the very first murder on earth, and God had grown so discouraged and disappointed and grieved about his creation and the disobedience, the wickedness across the earth. He grieved so much that he decided that he was going to destroy his very own creation. He had a plan to bring about a great flood across the earth and destroy everything except for Noah. Noah was a very righteous man of the time, probably the only righteous man of the time, but God decided to save righteous Noah and his family, and also to save creation, moving animals across the earth, pairs, a male and a female of every species and of every kind. And he instructed Noah very specific instructions to build an ark, and God then shut Noah, his family, all of the moving animals, the living animals on the earth and creatures, shut them into this ark. God waited patiently in his great love. He waited patiently for Noah to complete the ark, and then in chapter 7, we see that he shuts Noah and everything into the ark. We see that the great flood did come. It rained for 40 days and for 40 nights, and the entirety of the earth was covered all the way up above the mountains. And I'd like to say everything was destroyed. We will see later in Genesis and right through other parts of the Bible where there were some giants that survived, the Nephilim. We don't know how they survived, but they are mentioned later in the Bible. And we talked about those the Nephilim in the earlier podcast number 3. And so we see that God caused the rain to come upon the earth and flood everything. And it had never rained before these times. This was completely new to all these people on the earth. They doubted that there would be any kind of chastisement or that they would not survive, right? Because it starts to rain. And before water had come up in a dew onto the earth to water all plants. And so now we see this rain pouring, and God had shut Noah and his family and all the animals into the ark. And as started to rain and the earth became flooded, creation died that wasn't in the ark, and then the water rose all the way up over the mountains, and it lasted across the earth for many, many days. And we see that towards the end of the flood, that once the rains had stopped and there was a time, obviously, that the water had to recede, Noah had sent out birds. He sent out, I believe, he sent out a raven, and the raven did not return, right? The raven did not return, but he sent out a dove, and the dove would come back. And then it finally came back after testing from Noah out there. It came back with an olive branch in its mouth. And then he sent it out again and it returned no more. And so Noah knew that the lands were dry, the water was receding, and then he was able to leave the ark. And we leave off with him leaving the ark, and then God makes a promise at the very end after Noah comes out with his family and all creation, and he makes an altar. He builds an altar to God. He makes a sacrifice with the clean animals that he took specifically for this purpose into the ark, and he makes this sacrifice, and it was so pleasing to God, this sacrifice at the end, that God makes a promise. He says that as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. He says, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. So God promises to Noah that he would never again bring a flood of this kind. Now, it doesn't say in here that I will never chastise my creation for disobedience and for growing evil, but he does say that he will never again bring a flood. And so we see that today there are a lot of people that do not believe that the flood actually happened and that creation was destroyed. And I will say that there is confirmation further into the Bible that the flood did in fact happen. So all of these atheists out there and the people that doubt God, and that these things were, the Bible is a history. It is an actual fact that these things happened. And yet we have people that doubt that these events actually happened, that God actually did these things. The parting of the Red Sea, right? In Exodus, that didn't actually happen, right? So as Catholics and Christians, we know that this Bible is a fact and that it has happened. But confirmation that the flood did actually happen, Jesus himself had said in Matthew 24, 37 to 39. So Matthew chapter 24, lines 37 to 39. For as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. In the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So the second coming of Jesus Christ compared to the flood, that is confirmation for us. And then again, St. Peter, the very first pope of the Catholic Church, the man whom Jesus himself entrusted the care of the other disciples and to lead them. In the first letter of Peter, chapter 3, lines 20 to 22 in the New Catholic Bible. Those who had refused to obey long ago, while God waited patiently in the days of Noah during the building of the ark. In it, only a few persons, 8 in all, were saved through water. So there you go. History confirmed, not only in the Old Testament. It's not only told in the Old Testament, it is told in the New Testament as well. And it ties everything back all the way from Noah to Jesus and Jesus to Noah. So, number 2, I wanted to talk about baptism. Many people do not equate baptism to the flood, but it is tied together. It is together. And then also that many people question, why did we have baptism coming as a practice, a tradition? And it's not just because St. John the Baptist baptized people in the Israelites, Jewish community in the water of the Jordan, and Jesus, of course. That is a very famous quotes and story in the Bible about St. John the Baptist. However, and Jesus, of course, but however, that goes back all the way to the flood. And we see that again in the first letter of Peter, chapter 3, line 21 and 22. This water prefigured baptism, which now saves you. It does so not by the washing of dirt from the body, but by the pledge of a good conscience given to God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He has entered heaven and is at the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers made subject to him. And so we see that baptism, the flood prefigured baptism, because in the flood, Noah and his family, 8 people, were saved. Humanity was saved because all other living creatures, of course, were saved at the time. So, and then Noah and his family populated the earth once again. So, and today we have baptism to save humanity. St. John the Baptist brought this back, and he baptized the Israelites, the Jewish, to try to reestablish and save them. And he, of course, said, I baptize with water, but one will come after me who baptizes with fire. And then we see Jesus coming to St. John the Baptist, and he is famously, right, baptized, and the heavens opened, and a dove descended, and it said, this is my son with whom I am well pleased. And then Jesus actually started his ministry after the wilderness season, the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. But the baptism started in the flood, carried through to St. John the Baptist, and we keep this as a tradition today. And of course, St. Peter was our very first pope in the Catholic Church, and he created with the Holy Spirit, of course, the church and the precepts and the traditions of the church. I also wanted to talk briefly again about Our Lady of Fatima. The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared in Fatima, Portugal, to 3 children. It's a very famous story. All Catholics, I am sure, must know this story of the apparitions. Our Lady appeared once a month in 1917 to 3 children in Fatima, shepherd children. And many people did not believe that she appeared, but she appeared monthly she appeared starting in May all the way through to October. But in October, there was the miracle of the sun. And I'm going to just read to you from Our Lady of Fatima. There's a website, it's Our Lady of Fatima Miracle, and it's a very fascinating story. But I'm going to lay the facts out, right? Lay what happened out. And then you can see how scholars compare what happened at Fatima at this last apparition and this last miracle, this miracle, how they compare it to the flood and Noah and the ark. So the story goes, when it became known that the lady visited the children for the last time, that she would visit the children at the last time on October 13th, 1917, and had promised a sign that would convince the world she had appeared, many pilgrims made plans to attend. Though the region had been subjected to 3 days of torrential downpour, nearly 70,000 people journeyed through the heavy rain and mud to the place of the previous apparitions to witness the predicted miracle. Many were scornful, unbelievers whose sole intent was to discredit the children's stories. Suddenly, the clouds separated, and the sun appeared between them in the clear blue like a disk of white fire. The people could look at the sun without blinking, and while they gazed upward, the huge ball, the sun, began to dance. The huge fireball whirled rapidly with dizzy and sickening speed, flinging out all sorts of brilliant colors that reflected on the faces of the crowds. The fiery ball continued to gyrate in this manner 3 times, then seemed to tremble and shudder and plunge in a mighty zigzag course towards the earth. The crowd was terrified, fearing this was the end of the world. However, the sun reversed course and, retracing its zigzagging course, returned to its normal place in the heavens. All this transpired in approximately 10 minutes. After realizing they were not doomed, the crowd began ecstatically laughing, crying, shouting, and weeping. Many discovered their previously drenched clothes to be perfectly dry. It became known as the miracle of the sun. And the children, of course, were questioned over this, and their stories had never changed. Also, later, of course, the in that same day, actually, no, that was in July. I'm sorry. In July 1917, Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Our Lady of Fatima, gave the 3 children 3 secrets. So I'm sure that many people also remember the 3 secrets, 2 of which were released early. And then Our Lady had instructed the children to release the 3rd secret in 1960. It wasn't released until year 2000. And there's still a lot of confusion about that secret. But it talks of chastisement, coming chastisement of God if people do not turn from their wickedness and their evil ways and stop disobeying God. So chastisement on the earth didn't stop with the flood, but it was specifically provided in a secret to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Many people equate it to Pope John Paul. Saint Pope John Paul, and when he was shot, I think that was 1981, but there is some controversy over that. But what I wanted to kind of talk about with the flood is, it's very famous that God had sent a rainbow through the cloud, right? And he said, every time I see this rainbow, I will remember my covenant with man and the promise that he made not to destroy the earth ever again. And creation on the earth ever again. We'll talk about that more in the covenant with Noah starting in chapter 9 of the book of Genesis. But I wanted to just focus on the flood and how Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, is compared to these times of Noah, right? These apparitions happened in 1917. So we see today, the current time, tied back all the way to Noah and the book of Genesis, really. So Our Lady is compared to the ark because the ark saved humanity, and Our Lady became an ark who held God within her to save humanity. She is also called the New Ark of the Covenant, of course, because of Exodus and the Ark of the Covenant that was established created according to God's instructions in Exodus in the Old Testament, but that later disappeared. And rightly so, because we have the new Ark of the Covenant, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the saving of humanity through her yes to God. And so that's the number one comparison, right? She became a new ark, and Noah had the old ark, but also the great flood. So if you remember, as I was reading the story of the Fatima miracle, the miracle of the sun, we see that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights in the flood. But in the miracle of the sun, it had rained for 3 days and the entirety of the earth was drenched. In the flood, we have the entirety of the earth was overcome and drenched and flooded over to the mountains. And of course, we had the flooding and kind of just everything being soaked. And they talked about the mud. So it was that you can kind of see the comparisons, right? And then you had the miracle, like the sun coming out, right? And in the flood, it finally stopped raining, and then the earth dried, right? The waters receded. And then we had after the miracle of the sun, the the whole earth there, that area, was completely made dry. People's clothes were made dry instantaneously. So there's another comparison. But also, we see the rainbow that God put into the sky as a sign, right? And then the sign of Fatima with the sun, how it spun around, bright colors. It drove, down towards the earth, and then stayed stationary, right? It stayed stationary back to its place. But the bright colors and the whirring and the fireball that it became can be compared to the rainbow from the flood. Number 3 comparison. And number 4, we have the fact that the people were so scared, right? They came out there discouraged. They came out there scornful, saying, we're just going to disprove these 3 children. How can it be that the Blessed Virgin Mary would appear to these 3 children? We're going to disprove it right now. All the authorities, there's great movies about Fatima and talking about the authorities at the time, right? They want to disprove this. And Our Lady had, and God had created this miracle to prove that Our Lady had come. And all the people, it says, these people were so afraid, they thought it was the end of the world, right? And these other people in the flood that were not in the ark, right? These evil men and women and these evil families, right? They thought that nothing could happen to them. And then it became too late. Jesus himself said that people were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They knew nothing about what would happen until it was too late. The flood came and swept them away. There's another comparison. So, very interesting. And I'm glad that we could talk about this today. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode. I find it very fascinating and very interesting, and I'm glad to kind of talk about that with all of you. But I hope that you also found it as interesting. We're going to continue on with our episode number 5, talking about the covenant with Noah and continuing in the book of Genesis. And I hope that you all have a good rest of your day. Please leave me comments. If you have questions or something you wanted to share, feedback, I'm always willing to hear feedback of how I can improve things. I'm new to doing YouTube videos. I have been inspired by God, He has inspired me to create these episodes to talk more about the Bible, especially for Catholics, because we are not taught to read the Bible, and so this is somewhat of a Bible study, a Bible discussion, but also, if you have feedback, how I can improve things, maybe things that you want to see discussed in future episodes. Also, if you have prayer requests, I'm happy to pray for you, just as I pray for myself and my own family. And I wish everyone the best, but I know we all go through our own seasons and our own times with God. And so I'm happy to pray for you, and I will pray generally for all of you as well, and wish you all the best. So with that, we will cut it off now and then restart again with our next episode. Have a great rest of your day.